Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Alexa Hainsworth, and I'm the Member Services Coordinator for the Saskatchewan Craft Council. Visit our saskcraftcouncil.org for more information on our members, programs, and view our online shop. I'd like to invite those making fine craft or those who would like to become patrons to look into purchasing a membership at the SCC. I have the pleasure today of hosting For the Love of Printmaking. These three members, John, Graham, Monique Martin, and Dawn Rogal, are printmakers and mixed media artists. But first, I just want to take a moment to thank Sask Galleries and our sponsors, Creative Saskatchewan and the City of Saskatoon, for their generous support. It helps to make programming such as today's talk possible. Also, I want to acknowledge that this is the land on which we gather, Treaty 6 territory, traditional territory of numerous First Nations, including Plains and Woods Cree, Dene, Nakota, Saulteaux, and Anishinaabe, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. As we are all treaty people acknowledging traditional territories, and this relationship is one of many steps we can take to recognize the land's history, to pay respects to the Indigenous peoples whose practices, spiritualities continue to develop, grow, and contribute to this land. Before I turn things over to our speakers, I want to just let you know that we invite you to ask questions at the end of our presentation and to just type those into the Q&A box. And please state who the question is directed to, if it is to a specific artist. Okay, now I'll just do a brief background to our artists today. John Graham is a multidisciplinary artist based in Saskatoon. John started his professional creative life by studying architecture. He later shifted his creative focus to re-educate himself in the arts and develop a career in visual art and multimedia. His art practice includes printmaking, artist books, painting, installations, drawing, digital imaging, and experimental filmmaking. Since 2013, John has been the chair of the printmaking department at the Art and Art History at the University of Saskatchewan. So now I will just let John take it away as he may.
Thank you, Alexa. Oh, just gonna sit back here. There we go. Okay. Yes. So pardon the notes on the right side, but it's just those are prompts. I wish I had a teleprompter. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to people about printmaking. So I'll spend about 10 minutes to talk about a brief history of the various types of printmaking, and then I'll actually focus in on my own practice. So in this talk, I'm going to talk to you about fine art printmaking, but I'll also talk to you about etching, which is actually where I've done a lot of my work in the printmaking practice that I've evolved over about 20 years. And so printmaking involves the creation of hand-printed original multiples. This series of printed images known as a limited edition. And this is very different than a mechanically reproduced images that may also be edition. So the very first form of printed image may actually be stencils of hands. It is in this image that we can see on the screen on the left, as we see how stencils were used to mask pigment applied to cave walls by early humans. And here's an image of a printing press. So pressure is a very important part in the making of prints, but also most importantly, the type of printmaking matrix is essential. Now you can define a printmaking matrix as the physical element that will hold the printed image. A matrix may be a woodblock, an etching plate, a lithography stone, a screen and screen printing. Through pressure and printing, the image is inked in the matrix to create a repeatable image. So there are four types of traditional printmaking. The first being relief printmaking. And here you print the top of the ink top surface, and it could be a woodcut, a linocut. The next type of printmaking, which includes etching, engraving, dry point methods, and many other types of methods. Here you ink the incised portion of the metal plate or plexiglass plate. So in the third type would be lithography, and here you ink images which are drawn on stones or plates that have been processed with a chemical process using the principle of separating greasy ink and water. And finally, the fourth method of traditional printmaking would be screen printing. And this is printing inked images using a stencil method on a stretch screen. But one cannot talk about the development of printmaking without acknowledging the importance of paper making that originated in China about 1,000 years ago. The production of paper from cotton in Europe is also very critical to the history of printmaking. Both these images on the left are images printed with text, and they are examples of religious uses of printing. On the extreme left is an image of Buddhist iconography with text, and on the right is Christian imagery with Christian text. Historically repeatable images and prints have been successfully functioned as a way of propagating religious and political and social belief systems, both in Europe, in Asia, and elsewhere. A common example is the Gutenberg Bible that is emblematic of the Protestant Reformation, which used movable relief printed type to replicate the biblical text. Significant also to early science, printed images of plants served to advance early botanical classifications. So now let's focus on the first type of traditional printmaking, and this would include woodcut, linocut, etc. So in relief printmaking, you can see on the image on the left how the whole process works in terms of cutting the blocks in low relief and then printing the raised or uncut surfaces. So as I mentioned earlier, printmaking is an export from China. And so the woodcut method was developed in China and then assimilated in European cultures. So the very first relief prints were often used for commercial purposes to mark even prisoners and animals. They were clay tiles, wood, metals, molds, stamps to paste images and symbols onto paper and various surfaces, including skin. So in the woodcut process, we're actually using a block of wood, which is a relief method. Knives are used to cut out the image and or text and with other tools into the surface of a wooden block. The raised areas that remain after the block have been cut are then inked and printed. The recessed areas that are cut do not retain any ink because you move over with a roller and they remain blank in the final print. So in the West, woodcut is definitely the oldest form of printmaking. And so there's all sorts of applications of relief printmaking: textiles, decorations, playing cards, calendars, book illustrations, the list goes on and on. Here's an example of an early printing press. And here's a really fun GIF showing printing a relief block. There we go. So here's some examples of some Western artists doing relief prints, some very famous Western artists. Albert Dürer, and there's a Japanese artist, Hokusai, who did work with ukiyo relief printmaking in Japan. Vincent van Gogh was very influenced by ukiyo relief printmaking. His image is on the left. It's a relief print, Japanese print on the right. The German expressionists also appropriated relief printmaking. They found it very exciting. So they, even though it had this history of being a commercial process, they appropriated it into their artistic practices, including Ernst Kirchner, Katie Koetz, Edvard Munch, who's Norwegian, Pablo Picasso. We've seen his prints at the Reme. And contemporary printmakers use lots of contemporary relief printmaking with linocut. Dawn will talk about this as well. Examples are contemporary printmakers Helen Frankenthaler, Ansel Kiefer, Sean Caulfield, who's Canadian who teaches at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. Lauren Wilmer, another Canadian artist. So let's move on to Intaglio, the second method of printmaking, and this includes etching, engraving, dry point, mezzotint. So here's an example of an Intaglio method, which is characterized as a gravure process, which includes etching, engraving, etc., etc. The image was created in Intaglio into a metal plate or plexiglass plate, then ink is applied to the whole plate surface and then wiped off, and the image is printed and transferred to dampened paper with pressure on a printing press. And here you see the various carving tools which are used into metal or plexiglass. And this is used for etching, engraving, dry point, all of the various methods. Engraving is also used to print currency. And in this detail from a US dollar bill, you can see the syntax of lines that form an engraved image. So here's another example of Intaglio method, the dry point method, and this is the most direct method for producing prints. So the artist would actually draw, carve literally into the metal or plexiglass plate, scratching lines and developing an image from there. Here's an example of a dry point. The line work tends to be very velvety in quality. And so lots of artists have done dry point and etching intaglios, including Rembrandt, Mary Cassatt, Max Beckman, Marc Chagall, John Hartman, who's a Canadian artist based in Ontario. This is a dry point image. Kiki Smith. And so now I'd like to talk a little briefly about the etching process. So here, etching is a little different because rather than physically carving into a plate like in dry point, etching is used, you cover the plate with the resist and then you draw into the resist and then you immerse the plate into an etch of some sort, a mordant. It could even be acid. At the University of Saskatchewan, we don't use acids anymore. We use mordants or etches because they're less toxic. And after the chemicals bite the plate and create the image and size the image into the plate itself. And so you can see the plate on the left and then the printed image on the right. And so it's been etched, it's been immersed into a mordant, and then the chemical actually does the biting of the plate. And then you ink up the plate and print it. More examples of line etching. Then I'd like to present to you also the notion of how to present tonal areas in the Intaglio method. And one method is an aquatint process. And here's a close-up of actually how you can create tonal areas with the aquatint process, which is very effective. It's just like a charcoal drawing, and you can control the tones. And here's examples of the various textures you can create in Intaglio. Lots of artists have done Intaglio etchings, including Rembrandt, Francisco Goya, Pablo Picasso, Kiki Smith again. There you can see the lovely aquatint that she's used with the line etching and the drawing. Here's some contemporary artists who've used mix of line and aquatints and various other methods. It's another example. So you get a sense of actually what an Intaglio print looks like. Another method is mezzotint. So this is a reductor process, and mezzotint involves the use of a steel rocker with fine teeth, which is rocked back and forth on the plate to create a rich texture. The image is then made with a scraper and other tools so that the plate can be rendered smoother to create lighter values. So you see the image, that's actually a mezzotint on the right, and then on the left, you can see two rockers with fine teeth. Here's a close-up, some mezzotint imagery. Then the third method is lithography, the third traditional method. There are other methods of printmaking, but I'm just focusing on the main form today. So lithography was invented in Germany by Alois Sennenfelder in 1798. And here you can see a lithography studio where they do drawings and images on stones, and you can see an old lithography press below that, the color image. So here's a close-up of actually the lithography process, and it is planographic, meaning it's flat, and lithography is based on the principle that grease and water do not mix. So an artist will create the image, and then etch the image into the stone or plate, and then subsequently develop it. Here, the artist is drawing right onto the plate. There are many types of lithography. In this case, the artist is drawing on limestone. You can work with aluminum plates, etc. You can work, in this case, the artist is also working with a grease pencil, and then the stone's dampened with a sponge, inked and printed on a specialized lithography press, which is what the image we see right here, that's a litho press. It works very differently than an etching press or a woodcut press. And here you can see the artist is pulling the image, the lithograph print from the lithograph stone. Here's our various examples of lots of artists have used the lithography process: Henri Daumier, Vincent van Gogh, Edvard Munch, Odilon Redon, Candy Kollwitz again, Edvard Munch, another image, color, Alexander Calder, James Rosenquist. Here's another artist, which contemporary print. Lots of contemporary printmakers also do lithography both on stones and on plates. There's another lithograph image, contemporary image, color. Another one. Okay, screen printing is the fourth principal traditional method of printmaking, and it's also known as silk screen or silk screening, and it's one of the oldest methods of printmaking, and it also dates back from the Song dynasty in China. This process involves creating a stencil on an image on a screen of porous mesh, traditionally made of silk. That's where the term silk screening actually comes from. A roller or squeegee is then used to pull the paint-like ink over the stencil, forcing it through the mesh onto the paper being printed. Unlike the inks being used in some other forms of printmaking, screen printing sits right on the surface of the paper. The first method appeared in recognizable form in China and other countries around 1000 AD with stencil and block printing, as well as paint applications. Introduced in Europe in the 1700s, and this screen, silk screen was used with silk mesh from Asia. Today, we use synthetic screens. We don't use silk in the screen. So this is an image showing the technical process. You have a stretched synthetic screen on a wooden frame. You create a stencil image, which you can see in the lower image. Someone's painting in with screen filler, and that's how. And then they actually would ink up with a squeegee, which is like a. I'll show you the next image. There's a squeegee. You pull it across the screen and force the ink through the stencil and the openings in the stencil, and you create the image. In the 1900s, screen printing in North America and Europe and elsewhere was used as a popular method to print expensive wallpaper, printing on linen, silk, and other fine fabrics. It's even used today as well. With photographic process, screen printing took off in World War I as a way of printing flags and banners. And screen printing has also been used as a form of communication before becoming an art form. Art prints began to be valued as originals in the 19th century, began producing a limited edition prints. So here you see, even today, contemporary artists are using to create textiles or patterning on both on fabric and on paper, etc. In the 1930s, the term serigraphy was developed by a group of artists to differentiate the process from commercial printing. So it's actually sort of a term that curators and these art museums use for art, fine art prints. But so you have actually three terms: screen printing, serigraphy, and silk screen. Silk screening is a more sort of street term. It's a more common term, but the other serigraphy is a much more rare term. So screen printing is arguably one of the most versatile of all printmaking processes. And here you see images of screen printing materials. Because the reason why so is they're readily affordable, and they're frequently used in DIY or underground settings for subcultures. They've been used for posters, album covers, flyers, t-shirts, commercial fonts and advertising, and artwork, etc. It's very, very versatile. And screen printing, you literally almost can print on anything because you're printing on the surface. Here's an example of an artist holding up his work. And so lots of famous artists around the world have used screen printing, including Andy Warhol, Robert Rauschenberg. Here's various other contemporary artists, Esther McManus, Norman Tate, Bridget Riley, Rob Ryan, Syria Pop, which is sort of a collaborative group, all do screen printing. And of course, Kiki Smith again, she seems to do all of the printmaking types. So just as a quick resume of the talk, all of the 4 traditional methods use their own materials and each has their own histories, and each artist does with each different printmaking process, falling through their own affinities. So now what I'd like to do is focus on my own practice of printmaking. I'm going to zip through this pretty quick. Pluralism is very fundamental to me, and this tendency for pluralism inspired me to become a multidisciplinary artist. I really enjoy working through different artistic media to explore different ideas and sensibilities. But printmaking continues to remain the center of my art practice. So I'm also an experimental filmmaker who works collaboratively, but it's very important to balance my artistic practice with solo and independent art making by working in a studio environment, such as in a printmaking studio. Here we see an etching. So today I'm just going to talk about my work in Intaglio. All these images are etchings, and this is part of an artist book. I've always found that etching offers the warmth and impressions with embossed ink into paper. This is part of another artist book called Tone Spirits. I also really enjoy the ritualistic nature of printmaking, and because it provides the psychological satisfaction of repetition for me. And this process of creating multiple functions is sort of a meditation for me. I continue to be inspired by the idea of the original multiple and the democratic nature of printmaking. I value the interconnectedness of printmaking with other artistic media. Printmaking is exciting for me because it can absorb so many of the intrinsic qualities and process of drawing, painting, photography, digital arts, book art, sculpture, etc. I have a strong affinity for creating serial images. I enjoy creating self-published artist books as creative vehicles. Artist books allow me to develop my narrative imagination. Artist books also allow me opportunities to integrate my written poetry with printed images to amplify their meaning. So you can see here, all these images were accompanied with written text, and that was often the poetry that I wrote. I use the collage process in both creating written poems and art images in my artist books. Both processes involve intuitive building of spontaneous juxtapositions. Written poetry has also challenged me to further develop my understanding of psychological tone and visual symbolism. I've attended many printmaking residencies around the world, including this one in Belgium, which you see on the left. I thrive to change, and printmaking allows me to travel and to make new work in new studio environments. While attending an artist residency in Vermont, several artists convinced me to apply to graduate studies in art in the United States. 1 year later, I was invited to attend the MFA program at the University of Oregon in Eugene with a specialization in printmaking. Even after graduating from my MFA program, I continue to learn that the value of printmaking is as much process as product. I now appreciate that artistic tension is a powerful catalyst for any creative process. In 2001, I found myself teaching on Granville Island at the Emily Carr Art Institute of Art and Design in Vancouver. It was a very convenient studio because it was just down the street from Emily Carr. And this was also at the time of 9/11. My practice continued to simulate and distill ideas, allowing for a sort of a chemical process to shape the content of my images. It's very important for me to there be open-endedness in my artwork, both in terms of creation and interpretation. Here's another image that I created, Mouth Sapina. This is at the time of 9/11, and the bird is obviously predatory, warbird. I've created many etching projects at the Banff Center during artist residency. The dramatic landscapes of the Rockies continue to inspire me. Here's the printmaking studio at Banff. Here's an image, Raven Echo Raven actually. And I continue to enjoy building theatrical juxtapositions in my imagery. Here's another image I created at Banff. It's called Myth Cycle, and it's a very Mandela image. It's been described as evoking gods from an imagined cultures, including two-headed fish, a stretched piano. I often see my work as metaphorical, and they're almost gateways to the unconscious mind. Weightless Meaning depicts a dreamlike encounter of spirits with hybrid beings. This was created at Banff as well, this image as well. So my images tend to be very allegorical, symbolic, or mythological in nature. I've also recently been visiting with a printmaking studio in Denmark. It's in Odense, Denmark. It's called the Photographic Workshop. And this is where I created all of these images. This one as well. Hans Christian Andersen was born just in a house down the street from the studio, which is super interesting. I also, in the last few years, have been working in the studio Montreal, Atelier Circulaire. These images were created in Atelier Circulaire. Collaging is very important for me in the building of imagery, and philosophically, I'm convinced that collages exist in our lives. My artwork is not intended to resonate with the viewer by touching the viewer emotionally or psychologically, and activate her or his unique imagination. These are all images created in Montreal. I remain fascinated by the chemistry in the brain that creates the utter believability of dreams. This experience of the dreamer occurs because during the dreaming process, there's a suspension of chemicals in the brain. They're normally present for conscious critical facilities. Equally fascinating, the unconscious mind works 24 hours a day, whereas the conscious mind needs cyclical rest. So my art, and just to resume, my art projects are not intended to appease the conscious mind, but to challenge it. And this is a quote by Albert Einstein I find very, very inspiring. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That's a really great breakdown of all the techniques of printmaking and all the artists who utilize it in their work. And it would be great to have you as a teacher, I'm sure. So thank you for your presentation. I will go on to Dawn Rogal, who has worked as a printmaker, incorporating her background in fiber work to make unique prints that are stitched, quilted, embellished by hand. Dawn's work is created from fabric, threads, found items, and I think never enough sequins. She incorporates traditional embroidery, printmaking, and dyeing techniques to bring her pieces to life. I'll give it over to Dawn.
Thanks, Alexa. Thanks for having me here. That's a hard act to follow, John. I love your work so much. Let me get back to this mine here. Sorry. Oop, oop. There we go. So I'm going to talk about relief printmaking and specifically my my approach to it, which is a little unique, but let me get started. I'm going to introduce myself and relief printmaking, and John's obviously already given a great introduction to it, much more comprehensive than I will give, and it's just a great method. I'm going to step you through the process and then give some examples of my work. And mostly I get to talk about myself. So I've been a printmaker for a while now. I'm juried as a printmaker with the Saskatchewan Craft Council. And most of my training and classes that I took were in Seattle and Kirkland, Washington. We lived there for a number of years, and there's a really tremendous printmaking community there, very generous, very giving, and very embracing. So you get to learn a lot from a lot of great people. Relief printmaking is a family of methods, as John said, where you're using a block, a plate, or a matrix, and you're applying ink to the top of the print and then putting paper on it and adding pressure. So this includes wood block, linocut, metal cut, letterpress, rubber stamp, potato stamp. All of those are relief printmaking. If you've seen Picasso's prints at the Reme, those are primarily relief prints. And as a note, Picasso developed the subtractive relief print method, which makes my brain hurt, but it's a lovely method. The other thing about relief printing, and a lot of people are introduced to printmaking with this technique because you can use very, very simple tools. You can use a white eraser from your stationery stash and an X-Acto knife and paint or a stamp pad, and you're doing relief printmaking. It's really cool. And it's also a bit of the gateway method. So once you start, you will not be able to stop. So, but it can start simply enough, but it can also get very complicated very quickly. You start by choosing your design. I like to work from natural history. And as I say, both real and imagined, because some of my pieces tend to embrace my imagination more than the nature that inspired it. But I like to start from nature. I love to use photographs. And this is just a cone flower from my garden. I manipulated the photo a little bit not even in to make a design. And then through wood block, carved the wood block. These are traditional Japanese carving tools. Next, you ink up your block, and there's all sorts of inks that you can use. You can go from very inexpensive Speedball, which is inexpensive and available here in town. You can use oil-based, water-based, water cleanup, oil-based. So there's it can get very complicated very quickly with the type of ink you use. Then you choose your paper and you choose how you're going to apply pressure to it. And you can see in my studio, I've got a number of methods. I have a small printing press. It's an etching press. And I do use that for wood blocks and linocuts. But I will also just manually press the paper using barons. And I've got 3 kinds, as you can see, or even a wooden spoon. So you apply the pressure evenly and pull back the paper, and then you proof your block and see what you want to change, what you can't add. Once you've carved it, you can't put it back, but you can make changes as you go along. So this is kind of a repetitive process until you get the final result. Here's some more examples of it. These are really simple. This is really rubber stamping, but I'm using all my printmaking tools. But this is how I made last year's holiday cards that I sold at the Craft Council. So different blocks for different colors and just layering them on top of each other and getting a final result. This is this year's card where I printed 4 cards at once, carving them from linoleum and printing them on my press. So very simple, and you can see my studio is in my garage, so all those are drying on my garage door. So it is a simple process, but you can get beautifully complicated results. The bulk of my practice, though, involves using live materials. So I go out into my garden, into the parks nearby, out onto the prairie, and I bring in materials and actually just put the ink right on them and print them onto fabric. This is nerve-wracking because I'm using linen fabric and you only get one chance at it. So you're going to see mistakes, you're going to see pressure that isn't perfect, and that's part of the charm. We don't call them mistakes, they're features. So this is the kind of mess you get into printing live materials. Because I use printmaking inks, these then go into a drawer and set for about a month before I can bring them out again and start to add the embellishments that I like to do. So I'll show you, my talk is really fast. Sorry, I hope that's okay. I'm going to show you some examples of my work. This one, that block that I carved, this is the result. So you can see the image, and I created 3 different images from that photograph. And so in this piece, I've incorporated that wood block, and you can see my arrow here. So this is the wood block. I incorporated linocuts. Each of these beetles is a linocut. Now this ended up in another show at the Eye Gallery. So I'll talk about beetles again because they became a continuing theme for me. And that's kind of what happens with my practice is I go down a rabbit hole. I carved these wood blocks, I carved these bugs, and then I just used them in a million iterations. And then I also incorporated shepherd's purse. So that was a live printing as well. So I've got 3 types of relief on this. And then I go in with the sequins and the embroidery. And in this case, needle weaving. So these petals of these plants actually pop off the fabric. And this took about 3 or 4 weeks to do the embroidery alone. So that's what I love. I love these pieces that take massive amounts of time. Here's more of my beetles. Again, these were from my show that I had at the Eye Gallery. Thank you, Monique. And the show is called 100,000 because that is how many species of beetles there are in the world. And so what I attempted to do with 35 different carved beetles was to print them in such a way that it appeared like I had 100,000 beetles in the show. So as you can see from left to right here, I've got these ones are linocuts on and hand colored. So I printed them and then went in with watercolor, or in the case of this one right here, that's sheen collé, which I'll talk about as well. This is just beetles with collage. So just printed on top of a paper, mixed paper collage. And then this is a wood block. So those leaves are carved from a piece of plywood I found in the dump. And then my beetles, and using a sheen collé method, which you actually cut out the pieces of paper and lay them on top of your block and add glue so they are adhering to the paper with the pressure of the printmaking. And it's one of my favorite methods, very finicky, and I love it so much. These are 2 more relief blocks. These are using a couple of techniques. The background is a collagraph, and a collagraph is something you make out of whatever materials you want, and you glue them onto a hard backing, and then you seal them. Then, similar to etching, you ink up the entire surface and then start to remove the ink. And what's left is an impression of the collagraph. So the background on both are 2 different collagraphs made out of paper, just different papers. And I printed those first. And then the next layer is a stencil technique or pochoir, and where I cut out stencils and inked them and printed them on top of the collagraph. And this was a series I did for a show I had at the gallery in Outlook. And this was called Blackbird Identification Guide. And it was a show where all of the prints had blackbirds in them. And then I complemented it with fiber birds or structural fiber pieces that I did that were birds as well, blackbirds as well. So again, filling the gallery all with the same motif. So you know what, Monique, kind of similar to what you do, although on a very, very much smaller scale. I'm not working in the hundreds of thousands of beetles. This is the live printing that I showed you earlier. This is the final result. And shameless promotion, this is available at the Saskatchewan Craft Council's pop-up shop on Broadway. And this is the final result. These pieces, and this is ongoing, these are inspired by May Morris. And May Morris was the daughter of William Morris, who began the arts and crafts, or was one of the founders of the arts and crafts movement in Britain. And he was incredible. He designed wallpapers. He designed so many things. But his daughter May was an accomplished embroiderer. She was an accomplished jewelry designer. She was an accomplished wallpaper designer in her own right. And she was the one who kept the lights on for the family. She ran the business for the family to enable her father to become the icon that he was. So I really admire her, and she's never really been recognized until recently, where she was given a show, I believe it was in Scotland, featuring just her work. So this piece is called Not Her Father's Wallpaper, and they're inspired by the works of May Morris. And these are the live printing, and then I made them look like a wallpaper by adding the grid work, and that's all hand stitched with many sequins. And then I've gone in on the right-hand side, that's needle weaving again. And the maple seeds on both of these are stump work. So those are embroidered off of the piece and then added to the piece, giving it a three-dimensional quality. So this is what I love to do. The combination of printmaking and stitching is really my wheelhouse and makes me so happy. And I'm very, very lucky to have the support of the Craft Council, and that they let me bring these pieces in to hang in the boutique and to hang at Art Now. So I appreciate that very much. And that's it. So very quick rundown of what I do. And again, relief printmaking is a great way to get into printmaking. It's super easy, super inexpensive to get started, but you won't stop. You'll end up with 27 sets of carving tools like I own. You'll end up with a press. You'll be spending too much money on glass barons. So it's a super method of printmaking. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. That was very informative, and it's nice to hear a little bit about the meaning behind the work at the Art Now pop-up. Not Your Father's Wallpaper. I didn't realize it was a May Morris, but now the connection is to there. It's a fiber work, and having that, the trellis behind it is very humorous as well. So thank you for sharing that. Next, we'll talk with Monique Martin. Monique is also a multidisciplinary artist from Saskatoon. She has exhibited her work in more than 260 significant solo, invited, and jury group exhibitions in 12 different countries. International curators have selected her artwork for various exhibitions. Her works are held in more than 44 public and private collections in 10 different countries. Her printmaking pushes the boundaries and standard of printmaking in their enormous scale, installation-based printmaking, and 3D sculptural printmaking. I love her multiples, and I Look forward to hearing what she has to say about what she's doing these days. Take it away, Monique. Oh, you have to.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yay. All right. So that's a bit of a glimpse of my studio. I have a beautiful studio. I took the roof off my house, crazy thing to do, and put an extra floor on with super tall ceilings. And at the time I thought, I don't need those tall ceilings. Needed them many times. So that's just a glimpse of the one corner. I have my screen printing area in the basement where I have a washout booth, dry cab, and my exposure unit to expose my screens. I started out in block printing, linocut, actually in my own home at first because it was the easiest to access after I didn't have a printmaking lab at university. So these are very small prints. They're 3-dimensional. They are linocuts that I made 3 of the same thing on vintage paper. They are gold mining maps of Saskatchewan. The one on the left is a gold mining map of Saskatchewan that I got from a gold mining company that went bankrupt. They gave me them all, a truckload full, actually the back of a truck. And I printed linocut 3 times the nest. Then I cut them out by hand with a little X-Acto knife that you can see on the one on the far right for scale. And that's the tool I use to cut them out. They're layered, and there's something like a Chinese lantern that goes in, so the little eggs sit in there. And the little eggs are also 12 little pieces of paper that are interwoven together, kind of like those cardboard animals you see at the children's places. This is a print that I printed in Boston. The block is in the center at the back there. You can see right here, there's the block. I printed that block 3 times because I made it tessellate. So this side connects to this side to make it go into a group of 3. So that's what I printed when I was in Boston. It was a wood cut, so I carved wood. It took forever. It was so hard. And then it was shown in Seoul, Korea at the Museum of Art, which is on the right here. You can see the other printmakers and I. It was fantastic to be in that exhibition. It led to a lot of other opportunities for me because of who saw my work and my connection to that. This one at the bottom right is 24 feet long. It was hung at the Craft Council, and it is the same block, but it's printed 12 times in a row, so it connects together. High pressure to make that happen because the paper that long is very heavy, and then getting it to line up on the block so that the next one works and the next one works is just terrifying. I apparently love stress. I don't know. My doctor thinks I love stress. My blood pressure, just, you know, maybe I should not do such crazy things. Just a minute, here we go. Oops, I missed one. This is block printing as well. This in this exhibition, there's 1,400 square feet of printmaking. The bees on this exhibition are 5 to 7 layers of color and 3 different blocks. The background is, I think it's 12 different blocks of different colors, 3, 4, 6 layers to make it look like a beehive. This is the healthiest part of the hive. But there are ones that are not healthy. And if you see in the top left corner here, the bees are glistening because I used a pearlescent ink to make their wings look like they glow. This exhibition has been traveling for the past, since the beginning of 2015, and it's still traveling. It just finished in Halifax in the summer, and its next stop is in North Bay, Ontario, just coming up right away. Here is an installation of it. Well, this one is in Okotoks. This one is in Edmonton. So that gives you an idea of the scale when I'm standing there. And here's a close-up of the bees. There's little larvae and baby bees in the hives at different stages in the prints. I think it's been shown now. I think it's either 21 or 15 times. I can't remember. The dandelions have been shown 15 or 21. I don't know. I get them mixed up. Lots. I've hung these lots. I've done the latter thing a lot of times. These prints are double-sided prints on paper. It was inspired by little sketches in my sketchbook and the death of a printmaker, Jenny Tibb in Toronto. And they called for art that talked about her life. And I talked about it through this work because they are Moebius bands. And that's a never ending symbol. And I think as an artist, when you make something, it's there forever and you kind of continue to influence people even after you're gone. So they're back-to-back prints that are Mobius bands sitting into each other, which is really hard to do. And then this one is the same thing. It's Mobius bands sitting into each other and die cut. I cut them out by hand. So these have been shown in New York and Boston, Vancouver, Toronto, I believe also Portland, quite a few places. I took the idea again, and this was a call from the Chapel Art Gallery about the oil spill in Saskatchewan. So these are actually printed with ink and use motor oil from a car. So this is when it was kind of fresh, and it's been exhibited a lot. And what's happened is that the oil in the oil on the paper has slowly oozed. And so the thing keeps changing every time I show it. It's really, really cool. So every time I take it out of the box, I go, oh, it's just like when you get a little grease on your clothes, you go, ah, because it's gonna go and keep going, right? Yeah, that happens on paper as well. This one has been exhibited a lot too. This is a calculator. It was about the oil spill in Saskatchewan. I silkscreened fish on print ribbon, and then I rolled it all up again. Really hard. It's also really hard to figure out how to print them so they don't go crooked and they're all the right distance apart. Oh, it's crazy. Anyway, it was shown quite a few places, and in New York, people were encouraged to type into it, take it if they wanted, take the chunk or leave it there. So sometimes when they sent pictures, there were big rolls of the paper. Sometimes it was totally empty because people took it home. This is an installation at the Craft Council of Monoprints, which we've not talked about, but I'm going to show you a few when I demo. I'm going to show you what I used. These are envelopes that I use for monoprinting. So in a monoprint, the printmaker prints a matrix, puts the ink on a matrix, puts something on top and pulls it off. So I pulled off envelopes, and then I screen printed love letters from 1944 over top of those. And I encouraged the Craft Council to do this installation because letters fall into a mailbox kind of all over the place, and I wanted to replicate that in the exhibition. The pieces also do not have glass in them because I wanted the pieces to feel more accessible and not have that any kind of a barrier. And that's one thing about printmaking. It's super accessible to people because it is a little less expensive. There's multiples, and it just is an accessible medium. And I love that about printmaking. I also love making lots of something, but not making them exactly the same. It's kind of crazy. Here's close-ups of the monoprints. So the background was inked. I then put an envelope on, peeled it off, and then I did the silk screen over top. The center one, I'm just doing that project with my daughter right now. We're raising money for women's charities. And she came up with this great phrase, the silencing of women is so loud. And it is, just saying. This is a linocut. It's super large. It's, I think it's 2 feet. It's about 18 by 24. And before I did the linocut, I silk screened the background. So I silk screened a beige, then I put the linocut over top so that I have a bit of a warmth inside the black. The black and white is sometimes too much. So I will go in and silk screen or linocut a beige, a really light beige into a background. Here's an installation of my dandelions. There are 3,000 of them. And today I'm really feeling that I have 3,000 because I just installed them in Manitoba yesterday and then drove home. It took 2 days, 2.5 days to install the whole thing. It's lots of squats, but worth it. It's an exhibition about resilience, perseverance, not giving up. It's a bit about racism. It's about discrimination. It's about making quick judgments of people. And my dandelions, you can see them up close at the Remy in town and at the Saskatchewan Craft Council. And I had installations at the various places downtown this year. The exhibition is different in every location, absolutely different. Jane Goodall hung out with my dandelions for a bit in 2019. I was at her 85th birthday party, and that was pretty cool. And it's a beautiful photo of her. And there's the close-ups of some of my dandelions and an installation during COVID in Edmonton in empty buildings. It was just awesome to do empty buildings. This is an installation from an exhibition in Humboldt. I have dandelions in domes. And this is a linocut, huge linocuts. They're as tall as I am. And they're printed on vellum because I love the transparency of paper. And so I created a dandelion field without creating a dandelion field that's static. So each time this is installed, it's slightly different. It was printed by hand, not on a press. Like I used, you know, the wooden spoon, the metal spoon. I kept changing implements because my hands were wearing out. So depending on the day, what I used. Here's one of the installations of the dandelions in Saskatchewan and one of the domes. And here's the one from yesterday. Da-da-da. Okay, so I did squats for a long time, for 12 hours. I did squats, and then I decided that's not enough. I'm gonna climb ladders too. So then I climbed ladders. They did have twin ladders, which really helped. They had like identically twin ladders. It was the coolest thing ever. So I was pretty excited about ladders, you can tell. Anyway, these silk butterflies are silk screen. They're 15 colors one side, 9 on the other, it depends. They're the anatomically correct size. They have little magnets on them, and I use real branches and wire and magnets, and I install this whole crazy thing. And there are some gilded ones that are, you can see the gilded one in the center right here. Oh, where's my mouse? Right here. So I gild it, or I print it. While it's wet, I get gold leaf on it before it dries. I burnish it, and then later I silk screen it. And they're back to back. So I have to make it line up back to back. Talk about high pressure. It is so tense doing this. I actually, you know, why do I do this? Sometimes I wonder. But this exhibition, The Butterflies, is about transformation, how we've all been transformed by so much in our world. Right from the beginning of time, we've been transformed. And it's called Annus Mirabilis because that means a notable year. And we definitely had a notable year just recently. Here's pictures of the registration marks when I used to line up the butterflies to make them line up exactly. So here's the front of the butterfly on the left, center is the back, and here's the detail on the front. So you can see how many colors I have there, like tons and tons of colors. I draw the images myself. I don't rip images off the internet. The butterflies are drawn myself. And then I transpose them onto the silk screen. The right is an installation in Vancouver that happened, I guess not that long ago, 5 months ago. And it's the dandelions and one butterfly branch. And that butterfly branch is at Art Now with the Saskatchewan Craft Council pop-up thing on Broadway. Woo, go see it. This one just came back from Greece. I was in an exhibition with other printmakers in Greece. This is a monoprint, and I love it because I made it look like water without making water. And I'm not telling you how, it's trade secret. And then I used, I was talking about how humans take over nature. So I juxtaposed the really stiff squares and rectangles to mimic buildings of people. And this is the one I'm going to show you in a demo right away. I'm going to demo as fast as I can, going fast. This print is 52 colors, one color for each week in the year of COVID. And it is called The Pebble Does Not Know the Ripple It Leaves on the Pond. None of us know the ripple we leave on the pond. We make decisions and we put them out into the world, and we have no idea what our ripples cause in other people's lives, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. At my school, I use this as a discipline strategy all the time. And I say, okay, so you were nasty to this person, then this person goes home and they're nasty to their sister, then you and your sister get in trouble with your parents, and your parents don't have a good night. It's just this whole, oh my gosh, the pebble keeps going. So it's 52 colors that I hand printed. So we're gonna just switch over to another device. Just carry that. Okay, he's gonna just carry this. He doesn't mind. Okay, here we go. So John did a really great job of explaining printmaking. This is transparency. So it's see-through mylar. Or old, I found out old overheads work as well.
Sorry, Monique, can I just say, maybe you should do the stop share of your screen so we can see that a little bit closer.
Oh yeah, sorry that everybody. You're all going blind. Okay, here we go. Transparency. So I hand drew this part of the pond. So I'll hold up the print. Here's the actual print. This one's at the Craft Council as well. You can go see this live in person. So this is one of the colors on here. Okay, so it matches to those both. And I have on there little, what's called little registration marks. So each corner has a little mark on it that shows me how to line up my layers. Each corner has one. You can't just have 2, you have to have 4. And on my butterflies, I have as many as I can. I like on my butterfly sheets of paper, I sometimes have 9 registration marks because I'm printing back to back if I don't have that many. I'm hooked. So this is a silk screen. I then took this transparency, I put it on an exposure unit that puts light on it. Where the black stuff is, no light goes through. So it doesn't get cooked, okay? This green stuff here, this emulsion, got cooked and it's rock hard and it won't let anything through. Okay, so I'm gonna print my first one. I pull back my transparency because I don't want to print on it. And this is a squeegee. John showed you. Da, 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 squeegee. I have a whole bunch. I love them. And I bought this ergonomically correct one that's supposed to be really good for your hands. Apparently, I do not have the same hands as any other human. It does not work for me. Ah, the satisfying sound of ink on a screen. Okay, so I have my ink there. I have to do what's called flooding the screen. If I don't flood the screen, I get a print that is terrible. So I flood my screen and there's that satisfying squeak. You should be able to hear it when I do it. I should do a test print. What am I doing? I'll just do a test. I do a test on newsprint, and people who buy my work from far away are always very excited when it arrives because I send it as wrapping paper. So I'm testing, and newsprint sticks to it because it's thin paper. Okay, pretty good test. And I flooded my screen back again. And now I'm printing a real one. Here I go. This is my workout. I do not have a gym membership because I print thousands of butterflies and thousands of prints. So there you see the layers and the very, very tall, tiny marks, like extremely small, like your smallest little pencil line. Okay, I'm gonna print another one because I want you to show you how I can do multiples. So this is me putting on another one. I put it on these little pins, and these little pin dealies hold it in place. So then I get it really exact. Each one is exact, exact, exact. I don't often do large multiples editions of pieces like this. I do large editions of sculptural stuff, but not so much this. I don't know why. Just who I am. Another one. See, I'm just like a photocopier. I'm a human photocopier. Look at me go. I could go all day. I do have really large shoulders because of this printing I do. I'm not going to flood it now because I'm going to clean my screen on this one. 4. This is like Sesame Street. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, then I'm going to have a new color. Different color. This one's a little bit black, blackish, purplish, bluish. I think printmakers are the best at mixing color of anybody in the world because you can't buy that many colors of paint. If you want a good blue, you have to know that you need to mix orange with it. If you want a good green, you have to know that you mix red. Okay, so I did a flood. I'm going to just do a tester real quick. And whoever buys my next print gets these 2 water pieces in the mail. Okay, here I go. Let it. And there I have another layer. So this layer, if I did it right, which I don't have all my layers here, so I can't tell, adds to the shadow or the darkness of whatever I'm building. I can put it closer. Okay, I'll do 2 more because I don't want to bore you to death. And then I'll show you how the monoprint works. I'm not doing a monoprint, but I will. Oh, I don't know if I flooded it. See, human photocopier. Last one. I should raffle these off. In the crowd, we should pick out 3 names and they can have them. That's what I did last time. When I did it for my Vancouver exhibition, when I went to take it down, I took the prints and they were given to people. Not that they're much, but they could go, whoa, I saw that happen. Okay, so for this 52 color print, here are all the transparencies. There's one, another one. Each one of these is a new color, and I did one a week in the weird year that we have had. And prior to that, when we were in lockdown, while other people were buying toilet paper and baking bread, I made one color a day and made this print that is 45 colors. So one color a day during lockdown. And it was very difficult to do mentally and physically. Okay, so a monoprint. Where did my envelope go? Oh, here it is. Okay, this one belongs to somebody, so I have to be nice to it. Okay, she may be watching. Okay, this is the one of the envelopes I used to do a monoprint. Okay, so I inked a whole block with ink. I laid this over top very carefully like this. Then I pressed it down just where I wanted the ink to come off, and then pulled, whoopee, and then I pulled it up carefully, not like that. And then it took off the ink in that area. So I have a whole collection of those on my wall where each one is a print with the same concept, but they're all different. So thanks, I hope you enjoyed the demo. Here's butterflies, what they look like back to back. I overprint on both sides so that I can cut them out and they're perfect. And here's my little gold ones. Oh yeah, these are for sale for mental health. I'm giving 100% of the sales to women's mental health charities. So if you want one, let me know. You could end up with wrapping paper and a print. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Monique. That was a really great demonstration. I know you did it furiously and fast, but it was it worked well. I understood the whole process, and now I hope people watching too can now get a better understanding of how these are made. I've always appreciated your connection to the earth and your interest in, being part of the community in Saskatoon and discussing some of these love letters and mental health and the environment. And so I know you work very hard with, your shoulders are pumping away, but it looks effortless to us. And we're totally just gobsmacked at your multiples are really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, I think that will be it. I don't have any questions at the moment, but I just want to see if any of you want to plug your printmaking guild that you're thinking about creating, and if one of you'd like to maybe give some information about that.
Yeah, I can speak to that because I started the first one. We had a printmaking guild a while back called SPA, Saskatchewan Printmakers Association. And we ran it for a few years, and it was to encourage printmaking and to have an understanding of printmaking, because there's a big misunderstanding when people take a painting, photograph it, and then have somebody print it at a print shop. That's not a print, that's a reproduction. And I don't mind people do reproductions, but the Printmaking Association wanted to make sure we have the correct terminology. Because if you're not hand pulling something or pushing it through a press yourself, if you're pushing go on a print machine, it becomes a reproduction. And also a printmaker imagines a print as a print when they start. They don't imagine it as a painting and then take a photograph of it and make it into a print. It starts out as a print idea for a printmaker. So we started an association and we did some stuff and we had some shows, and we were supposed to have an exhibition in Korea, actually opening in October, this October, but COVID, so we're not going, which is sad, but we're starting a new association and hope to involve a whole bunch of printmakers and do workshops in communities and have exhibitions and print exchanges. We have this great idea to partner up a printmaker, an adult printmaker with a little kid, and they make prints together. Woo, about the environment, it would be so good. So Dawn's doing all this amazing work on the admin stuff because I am bad at that. And so she's doing that. And John and I are encouraging her like crazy. And we're just hoping it takes off.
Wonderful. I also wanted to ask John if he wanted to plug he's being part of Nuit Blanche and tell us maybe a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm working with Shane Junop. The two of us are collaborating together. We're doing a projection. As I mentioned in my presentation, I am a filmmaker, but I've never actually done a video installation projection before. So in Nuit Blanche, we were invited to do this collaborative project. We're working at Rivers Landing. We're projecting hares, jackrabbits, and horned owls. And today I was finishing it up, reworking it again, and rather than doing sort of a naturalistic sort of projection, I was messing around with the computer and it sort of messed up and ended up creating these abstract images as well. I think all of us relate to crazy computer sort of has a mind of its own. And anyhow, I ended up producing this sort of wacky, wonderful looking thing. So yeah, we are doing these projections in Nuit Blanche at River Landing near the Victoria Bridge. There's some other artists in the area as well, working as well. So please come and visit us on the evening in Nuit Blanche. I think it's from 7 to midnight. And our particular project is called Watch or Bolt. And the watch part is the owl observing the world, and the bolt part is the hares, which live in Saskatchewan, because it's lots of hares, as we all know, are in the city, jackrabbits, because it's a predator shadow. I've heard actually that there are cougars and things like that on the riverbank, but that the hares, they can find food and there's shelter here, and they're not threatened by predators. And the reason why we chose owls as a Saskatchewan animal is that they are definitely a definitive prairie animal. So I welcome everybody to visit us. Shane's and I installation at River Landing and the evening of Nuit Blanche.
I also have a Nuit Blanche. Am I muted? No. I am installing 20,000 butterflies in the back of a semi-trailer truck that will be parked at Midtown Plaza parking lot. The butterflies will glow in the dark, so you'll walk into the truck, the lights will be on, and then I'll shut the lights off and you'll probably go, ee! And then you'll see the butterflies. It'll be very exciting. And when you leave, you get to take a butterfly with you. And the project is called Breathe, because during COVID, breathing has been everything we talk about. Not breathing in our mask, remembering to breathe because we're having panic attacks over getting COVID, and people dying from not breathing and all of that. So when you leave, you get to take a butterfly that says the word breathe in the wings. It has a magnet and you can put it on your fridge, and every time you walk by, you can take a deep breath. I printed them with students, a studio assistant I have, and my husband. There's a lot, and then all my friends cut them out and they're still my friends. So that's something, you know, that's pretty good.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. We have just some comments I can read to you. It's amazing to see the diversity approaches to printmaking. Each artist has such a different approach to color. Thank you. And another person that says, really good description of print versus reproduction. Thank you. Very good. Thank you so much, you guys, for sharing your work with us and how it's created. I'm very appreciative of all your knowledge and taking this time today with us. Please come out and visit our artist work at our SCC Art Now pop-up gallery at 818 Broadway Avenue, and also visit us at our gallery and boutique on 813 Broadway Avenue to see all of our other SCC members' works are up in our boutique. And as well, we have a new exhibition called Touch the Conversation by Grace Han. I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and visit us at theartnow.ca to see all of the other Saskatchewan galleries up there, and visit us again, saskcraftcouncil.org, for more information about our programs and exhibitions. Thanks again, you guys. Hope to see you soon.